Good morning, everybody. It's great to see Monday morning early. Everybody is here to talk about nuclear. It's incredible. I don't think we would have thought this 2 years ago either, Reed. So congratulations to you and your team for pulling this off. The speaker lineup is tremendous, so I think there's going to be a message sent that Texas is ready to lead on nuclear. Vistra is in a much better position than it was to lead on nuclear with the recent acquisition, as you mentioned, of the 2 sites in Ohio and Pennsylvania, which just completed 6 months ago. But the story of Vistra, for those of you who aren't familiar, the predecessor company, TXU, first powered Main Street in Dallas in 1885. So we're still doing electricity. The way in which we do it's dramatically different. And in 2016, we had just completed a restructuring process because we were privately owned. We had too much debt, so we spun out and we said we want to look at the name. And we came up with Vistra, which comes from 2 words, vision and tradition. So we were not going to walk away from over 100 years of the tradition of serving customers and communities, but we knew our fleet needed to change. We were 70% coal, and we needed to, excuse me. We knew we needed to decarbonize our fleet over time. So we set a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas goal by 2030. We've already achieved 50% reduction. But we didn't just want to shrink as a company. So we acquired Dynegy. So we went from 0 megawatts of combined cycle gas turbines to 20,000 megawatts of combined cycle gas turbines. We went from 1 nuclear site to 4 nuclear sites. And we have one of the largest storage facilities in the world in Monterey, California, sitting right next to a combined cycle plant, 750 megawatts of 4-hour lithium-ion battery. So our people, we get up every morning. Our purpose is lighting up lives, powering a better way forward. Our people know that pretty much everything Vistra is doing is in motion. There's no such thing as standing still in the energy space. Our team has never been busier. We are truly a collection of the best of multiple organizations, and scale matters in this business, and scale matters even more in nuclear. So that's kind of a little bit of the history of what got us to where we are, Reed, and excited to have a conversation about what we can do more.
Excellent. Before obviously we're going to talk about nuclear, and we'll get there in a minute, but one thing, you and I were talking last week, and I was looking through a slide deck that you recently presented, I think, to the Dallas Regional Chamber. And one thing that really struck me was your position in the U.S. market versus really the market growth here in ERCOT in particular. That slide showed that Vistra's generation by installed capacity, nuclear was at 15% and renewables were at 4%. And parenthetical here, I'll note that the actual production for nuclear was 23% and 1% for renewables. And then another slide showed ERCOT's growth since 2002. And I think this one really hit home for me because it really sort of is the reason or the genesis of the idea for the Texas Nuclear Alliance. And it said that 86% of the growth in ERCOT has been wind and solar since 2002. And, I guess my question to you, and frankly, I think we see ERCOT may be a dramatic example of this, but I think we see that trend across the country and frankly, across much of the world. And my question really is that sustainable? Is that type of growth in renewables without baseload generation really sustainable?
Yeah, one of the things you realize when you operate in all these markets, and we're in all the competitive markets across the U.S., is, we are owner-operators, we're not policymakers. And so what we do is we allocate capital, and we will invest in our fleet, we'll acquire fleets, we'll develop assets. But policies have really driven what you've seen as this rapid expansion in Texas. Happens to be the easiest place, and I think that's something Texas should be very proud of, but it's the easiest place to do business. So if you're looking to deploy capital and the federal incentives, particularly codified in the IRA, around wind, solar, and battery, that is the easiest thing to do. And if you look at the interconnect queues across the entire country, they're all 90+% wind, solar, and battery. Our philosophy is that dispatchable assets have real value. And dispatchable assets start, in my mind, with the customer need first and work backwards. a lot of the wind, solar, and battery starts with more of a supply side strategy of we can do it cost effectively and we can put it out there. And I think what customers are starting to realize and policymakers are starting to realize is that the reliability of the electric grid, which we prioritize reliability, affordability, and sustainability, and we say in that order. And a lot of policies are focused on the third. They're focused on sustainability with the assumption that reliability and affordability are a given. We're seeing that that's not true, especially as coal continues to retire. So we believe nuclear is the best way to fill in that dispatchable product that is also sustainable, and the challenge is, can we do it affordably? So when you look at the three-legged stool, all these different resources usually cover two of the three. The Texas market, in my opinion, has focused more on affordability, and through the transmission plan, which makes it very easy to build and connect, has also achieved sustainability. But it's still working to try to achieve the reliability that other market designs eventually might be needed in order to incentivize big assets and expensive assets like nuclear to come to the grid.
So, yeah, let's turn to nuclear. Obviously, you mentioned at the outset that Vistra has the second largest fleet of nuclear in the U.S. Saw your comments, Squawk on the Street in our video about how nuclear has got to be a part of the generation mix. It really sounds like Vistra is all in on nuclear. Can you talk about your goals for expanding nuclear from here?
You know, you have to kind of earn the right to grow. So we were a single site company. Comanche Peak, I think, was the youngest 2-unit site in the country to come online until Vogtle 3 and 4. So even the difficulties of dealing with an older asset base is something we're still learning. And so when we acquired the 3 sites, we have integration efforts, you know, they will start before the close this past March, but are in earnest, and the leadership team of our team that's leading the integration is here today. In fact, we're leaving this afternoon to go to Pittsburgh to visit Beaver Valley with our board of directors. So first thing you have to do is earn the right to be a nuclear operator. So you've got to run safely first, then you got to run reliably, and then you hope you make money. But safety is absolutely job one. So the next thing we're looking at is what uprates do we have as capabilities at these plants? And our team here thinks we have the potential to potentially add 500 or 600 megawatts across our fleet through uprates. So that would be the next natural extension. And then look, I think because we have a secured perimeter, we have land, we have water, we should be able to expand, whether that's large scale or small scale. I think our sites are natural places for further development. I know many entrepreneurs here and CEOs here with the SMR technologies would look at a partner like Vistra as a site, I think, for opportunity, and we would welcome that conversation.
Yeah, I think just want to drill down on that last comment. Obviously, Comanche Peak was originally planned to have 4 reactors, and actually went far along in that process of building those other 2 reactors. Now we see small modular reactors coming online. What do you see? Obviously, you're open to both. How do you see that? I don't want to say competition, but how do you see those 2 different types of assets really kind of deploying? And is there really kind of a future for both in your mind?
Yeah. My whole background is competitive markets. I joined the industry when it became competitive, so I've never had a rate base. It'd be nice to have a rate base. I've never had one. But I will tell you, it's one of the things that goes through my mind is how can a market design anywhere support 6, 8, 10 years of cash outflows before you start to get a cash inflow? And I think that's also why you saw the wind and the solar build out, is they're relatively quick. Personally, I would like to say that there's room for both, because large scale should be done at a per unit set of economics that are pretty attractive. And the problem is we just don't have the muscle memory as a country to be able to do this. And Vogtle 3 and 4 went a long way to getting us there, but now time's elapsing, and you've got to figure out, can you get momentum again on large-scale nuclear? Small-scale nuclear is very exciting to me because I think it's going to be much more customer-led. I think you're going to see people, not just power companies, but large industrial users, tech companies saying, I want one. And because of the nature of competitive markets, and again, starting with the customer use case in mind and working backwards, I think you're going to see both have opportunity on the electric grid.
So you brought up data centers and big tech, and obviously, lots of headlines just in the last couple months with some of these, tech giants partnering with nuclear. Tell us, why they've got their eye on nuclear and what you're hearing from these customers, and what can Texas do to take the lead? I mean, obviously, data centers are huge loads. We've been challenged recently with, peak demand. What does Texas need to do to take the lead and make sure that it continues to be the home of data centers and AI?
Well, Texas has a lot of natural advantages, some of we already mentioned, but when you look at the just sheer industrial capabilities of this state, from oil and gas to chemicals to automotive to chip manufacturing to steel making to construction, this state can pull it off if it wants to and do it more quickly than any other state that we do business in. Part of the challenges, I think, and the data center folks are realizing this, is they're running a 24/7 operation. And to this point, most of their sustainability objectives have been, again, met by wind and solar. And they're stringing together the sort of hours of operation to achieve a 24/7 load profile. The math, I think you were referring to this, Reed, before, is from a reliability standpoint, you might need to be pulling together 8 or 9 times the number of megawatts in wind and solar to equal the megawatts of a nuclear plant or a gas plant, plus the transmission build out to connect all of that. So the total system costs of that approach may actually be more than just doing large scale or small scale nuclear, but each of these decisions is made in a generally fragmented way, through the actual interfaces that, the way in which the markets unfold today. What the data center folks are telling us is they want to be part of the solution, not the problem. So the attention that's been given so far has been the data centers that want to physically be in location to a large plant. That's actually hyper efficient from a grid standpoint. It's the least amount of transmission. It's got the load profile that matches the generation profile. But they also want to be part of building new nuclear. It just takes time. So the data center folks are coming to us and to basically any operator of nuclear and saying, regulated or competitive, and saying, help us get started. This country cannot wait for AI. AI development can't wait for this country to build new nuclear. We need to get going now for national security purposes, but we will also invest in uprates in new nuclear to make sure that there's sufficient supply out on the grid. So all the conversations that you're hearing right now, I view this as if load comes in, and they've shown in a couple of the deals that are announced that they're willing to pay a premium. They're not looking for lowest cost. This is actually a customer base that's showing up and putting value on a carbon-free attribute and dispatchability, which most electric grids do not put value on carbon-free attributes, and only a couple put value on dispatchability. They're saying we'll put value on both. We'll pay that premium. We should welcome that, because with that, companies like ours can actually invest in the next set of assets. So people are worried about, can we balance the supply demand? As a state, if we go kind of gas pedal, hit the brake, gas pedal, hit the brake, or in power pedal and then let off, if we do that, we're going to send very mixed signals, and it may not come to Texas. Other states are actually recruiting this load. They're providing incentives for this load. I'm not actually hearing the data centers say they need a bunch of incentives. They just need an open door. And if they are given the open door, I think they're going to have a chance to have huge impact. And there's no doubt, as the 8th largest economy in the world, Texas could just grow leaps and bounds if they embrace it.
So you mentioned not having a rate base, and I'm going to open up the question that has divided a lot in this city for the last few years, really since Winter Storm Uri. But you talked about the market not really valuing sustainability or clean power. What about reliability? Is that something that ERCOT really needs to take a look at valuing? Going back to the second question about the rapid growth in renewables, and even within your fleet, it's 4% of installed capacity, but it's 1% of actual production. Does Texas need to look at, and ERCOT need to look at, really valuing true reliable sources of energy.
Yeah, the challenge is, as I mentioned, of reliability, affordability, sustainability. Texas has hugely benefited on the affordability front. And you see industries looking to locate here because it's very low cost energy. Contracting out 10, 15 years is not a problem. You can hedge your power costs and have very good comfort if you're trying to build an industrial base. What I fear is that it's also, because it's the easiest place to do business, it's also the easiest place to site the renewables, as we talked about. So what we have is this boom-bust dynamic that's happening in the marketplace. And if you were to go out and even build a gas plant, which is a 2 to 4 year process, let alone a nuclear plant, you're just projecting what is the real-time price of energy 4 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And am I going to be able to sell my investors on my ability to predict that? And I don't think I could sell them on that, because we've been wrong multiple times as an industry and certainly as a company. So the question before Texas, again, we're not policymakers, we're owner-operators, and we will move towards where the market signals take us, is do we get to a point where the marginal cost of power is effectively zero for some of these assets? And if it is, then how does a marginal cost of zero, which might reflect your revenue, incentivize the next capital investment? And I would just say California's heading there, and they're sending that signal. They have a reliability signal in their market design. PJM does, New England does, Texas does not. But Texas has probably been ahead up to this point because it's had super low cost power. The question is it going to need to pivot at some point? It's hard for companies like ours to bring it up because it looks like you're talking your book. But we raise the point because it's a point that policymakers, whether it's ERCOT, the PUC, the legislature, or the governor, they will want to consider that point, because we want to incentivize the 20 to 30 year assets. To your data center question earlier, they are willing to contract that far out at a premium. Other large customers we've approached are not willing to contract that far out at a premium. So it's either going to have to be large customers willing to contract that way, or market design changes. And we look forward to being part of that conversation.
So I mentioned earlier that kind of one of the things that really got me into nuclear and got me starting the Nuclear Alliance was, after Winter Storm Uri, just trying to learn about the ERCOT marketplace and what was going on, and realizing that, the nuclear fleet was supposed to be, here in Texas, supposed to be twice as big as it is. What would it take, what does Texas need to do to build new nuclear plants in this state? We've got a legislative session coming up here in January. What do we need to do to make that happen?
I think the state, in supporting the development, more on the R&D and demonstration side, I think could be hugely beneficial. I know that there's discussion of how could the state allocate resources so that this becomes the hub of activity. There's always a balance between how do you support the activity and at the same time not have an undue influence on how the market actually performs. One benefit here is there's time on this. Like, you're going to actually do the R&D and the demonstrations, and these aren't going to be deployed in a meaningful amount in the next year or two, so we can tackle the policy side. So this legislative session, I think allocating resources to helping get this off the ground could be hugely beneficial, send a signal that Texas wants to be the national leader in export capabilities. So one dimension of nuclear is this the easiest market to put a plant, on the ground? I think it is. Is it the most economic to put a plant on the ground? Probably not. But could this place be the hub to learn the capabilities to then be the leader for the rest of the country and maybe the world? Absolutely. So I think there's two dimensions. Like the jobs at Comanche Peak, for example, on average, salary benefits, those are $200,000 a year jobs. And there's 600 folks at Comanche Peak. So we would love to expand the jobs base. We would love to be able to have Texas be the leader on the ground installed. But even if that takes time because of some of the market design challenges, Texas can still lead in building the capabilities that the country and potentially the world needs for nuclear.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, as I said sort of at the beginning, this is a huge economic development opportunity in my mind. We've obviously got some challenges, but the industry is going to have to regrow itself. And I think if if the legislature and regulators take the right steps, I think we're going to see Texas, for a lot of the reasons you just said, I think we're going to see Texas sort of be the home of the industry, and that's really the purpose of today, and hopefully the alliance going forward. So, one last question. I think we've got time for it. Really, I think when it comes to nuclear energy, what do you want to ensure that this audience today takes away from our time here today?
I know folks have come from all over the country, so this is a very Texas-centric meeting, and some people get tired of the Texas centricity to everything. But my family is just a real personal example. My brother and my father were Exxon employees. I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, but they both moved to Texas because Texas was a magnet, and they retired with Exxon. My brother moved from Baton Rouge to Houston to work for HP. My sister moved to San Antonio because she was an Air Force pilot. And then I moved after college to Texas, didn't know anybody because I said, this place is open for business. So I would just say whatever we can do to keep Texas open for business on the load side and on the supply side, I don't think any other state's ready to move the way Texas is, and I would just make sure that we keep that excitement and frankly keep the edge that we have here in Texas.
Jim, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Reed. It's a real pleasure.